In this next session, one of my favorite counselors, Rita Summers Flanagan, is doing person-centered therapy with a man named Michael. And I'd like to start by saying in 1942, Carl Rogers said, he made a bold claim. He said that personality change and positive therapy outcomes will occur, can occur, based completely on the development and establishment in therapy of a certain type of relationship between client and therapist.
I'm really quite complimented that you said I was one of your favorites. I thought for sure you were going to say Carl Rogers because he's one of your heroes. Anyway, so one of the things that Rogers said is that it's both necessary to have those core conditions and sufficient, which at the time was controversial and probably still is.
Yeah, and the core conditions are not micro skills, even though it is important to do active listening when you're doing person-centered counseling. Right. But the core conditions are attitudes that the counselor or psychotherapist holds while in the room with the client. And those core conditions or attitudes are congruence or genuineness, unconditional positive regard or sort of an amped up respect, and empathy or empathic understanding.
Yeah, and for Rogers, I think the idea was in those conditions with the work together, there would be the emergence of the self. And one of the things he said was absolutely essential was something he called contact, which is that connection in the room between the person and the counselor. And
we'll see as this next segment begins, Michael comes in and he's talking about Crohn's disease and his medical diagnostic journey.
Right.
And at the point where we pick up the session, Rita is listening and he's talking about some stress that he has experienced in his life.
Yeah, let's watch.
I wanted to change my life so that I didn't have so much stress in my life. I was an independent consultant. I worked, 80 hours, 90 hours a week consistently for 7-8 years. I didn't get to see my children kind of thing, even though I worked in the home. And it was kind of like I'd fall asleep at my desk, wake up and keep working, that kind of feeling. And I'm like, I need to change.
Yeah.
And, thankfully I had an opportunity to go teach, which is what I really wanted to do. And, it's been fantastic. But at the same time, what I do is I tend to go, oh, it would be really fun, as I could do this, and I could help you do this. And, trying to reduce that in my life, or as my wife says, try to create barriers so that you can say no. And I have a hard time saying no.
Yeah. So saying no is hard. So your wife, who knows you well, is saying, okay, Michael, maybe you could build a barrier that would allow you to say no.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And, and then of course I have, my family, and they're of course very helpful, but they have lots of needs as well. They have their own internal issues going on, and they have me in the middle trying to help mediate their issues.
You mean larger family, not just your kids?
Yeah, larger family, family origin.
Yep.
And so they have issues within themselves, but
sure.
I'm the rational one. I can help them, and so I'm their sounding boards on both sides. We're having issues. Can you help me deal with that? And how do you say no? Well, I don't know, and I try, but it's difficult, but it causes me a lot of stress. It causes me a lot of stress because I don't want to take a side for somebody. I don't, even though I clearly see all you really need is, honestly, why don't you go see a counselor? That's what I want to say.
Yeah.
But on one hand, one person says, counselors are just paid friends, which then I have that going through my head too.
Sure.
And then I have on the other hand, the other one like, oh, I don't need a counselor. I can figure this out on my own. So I'm like, but you use me. You buy me lunch, but it's not.
So if they're paid friends, you're not getting much of a salary out of this, are you? Yeah.
But I want to be there for them, but it's just difficult.
Yeah.
And I can feel it. I mean, it's the craziest thing, but I can feel it. But it's such a strange disease in some ways because I just keep thinking to myself, but it's not cancer. So what do I have to complain about? Why am I complaining about something? Okay, so I have an upset stomach, so I have digestive troubles that last for a few days, but I have drugs and they mostly help, and I don't know, and it's hard. It's hard, that I don't know. I don't really know how to actually wrap my mind around it. I'm still, I feel like it's, when somebody told me once that it's kind of like the stages of grief, right? Or where I feel like I'm still oscillating between anger and denial, and I'm wanting to get to acceptance, but I just keep brushing it and thinking, I'm almost there. No, I'm not. And I just keep going back and forth like, because I feel angry that I can't exercise like I used to. I mean, I used to, and my doctor says, oh, you'll be able to get back to triathlon, you'll be able to get back to marathons, but I can't even run. I mean, it hurts so much, and I'm like, gosh, I used to just gut this out. I should just do that. But I know that if I do, I damage myself worse, and I know that when I have already, that I have to lay on the couch for a couple days. I mean, I feel that bad. And when I feel bad, then it's like, oh yeah, all the stuff that I'm telling you, it doesn't even bother me because I'm just too tired. I hurt too much, and it's like, well, your body says you're done. You're done.
So you throw yourself at everything as hard as you can, and then you hit this wall. You're out for a while. Then nothing matters because it hurts so bad. You're so exhausted. You're forced to be on the couch. Then you recover. Then
you start thinking about all the little things again.
You're back there.
And I would like to get to a place where I can find some contentedness in just being okay with this is what I can do. I try to create a mantra, right, where I'm like, just be thankful for what you can do, not be continually wishing what you could do or remembering what you used to be able to do. And I try to be thankful for that. I think, okay, I went for a ride today, and I'm really thankful that I could just go out for a ride today. But then I was like, gosh, I used to be able to, just in the back of my mind, I used to be able to do this, or I used to. And so some ways I feel, I just kind of get mad at myself, like, okay, be okay with it. Be okay with it. And
so this is type A talking to type B, right? And then type B is talking back to type A. And
and, and I just, because I feel guilt. I worry that something is going to make it so that I can't teach. And that's the one thing that I really love to do in my work. I love computer science, I love writing software, but I really love teaching. And so for me, if I couldn't teach, that would be really hard for me.
So you've had this style in life of, I'm going to just say, gutsing it through, being your own central physician. I mean, the story goes all the way back to you're the central problem solver and had the energy to figure out what was going on, right? Network, internet, resources. So you get that figured out, and now I've arrived in this spot where you know what's going on, but you're questioning if the style you've had your whole life is going to work with this new management issue with the disorder. And I'm hearing a little fear.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Because I mean, it just comes back to I already I mean, for me, I have issues with even my own masculinity sometimes, right? And so then to have a disease that makes you feel like you can't do all the things you used to be able to do, and all of a sudden you're already faced with that. I already have relatives that tell me, well, you just need to toughen up. It's like, well, I would like to, but the intestines say no. And that's not one of those things that are very comfortable to talk about either. It's it's kind of like when you have cancer, you say, I have cancer, and it kind of trumps all, right? Everybody's like, well, you're done. Well, you win, kind of thing. And,
exactly.
And I don't actually want to win. I just want to be, in some ways, left alone. And I don't want somebody to tell me, toughen up. I don't want somebody to tell me, it's going to be okay, everything's okay. I don't even know exactly what I want. But because I have these, I don't even really tell people. And that's the part that makes it kind of hard and strange, is I don't actually share this with anybody. So when I have people that are somewhat strangers coming up to me and saying, how are you feeling? I feel like I don't know you. And I feel a little nervous now. So a
little nervous, a little ashamed, a little resentful that this is your story and you really don't want to have to tell it every time you turn around.
And how much do you really want to know? That's always the really interesting part. Because I had this person that, that actually, just by pure happenstance, I raced with him a lot in triathlon over the last 5 years. He's a nice guy, and we just had a nice rapport with each other. I thought, and I saw him the other night when my wife and I went out for a date. I'm like, hey, it's good to see you. And he's like, hey, you didn't race this last weekend.
Yeah.
What happened? I'm like, and I just paused. And Karen's like, I'm going through my mind thinking, I don't even know who this person is. Does Michael know this person? And I'm like, and then she's like, and I'm like, well, I just got sick. And he's like, oh, okay, no problem. She's like, and she asked me about it later. I'm like, I honestly was just trying to think of the right response for the moment, because I don't know him that well, but I didn't want to be untruthful. I didn't want to say something that wasn't true, but she's like, I honestly just didn't know how much you were going to go into it. I'm like, oh no, I don't know him that well. And I think it would have been a little uncomfortable for him.
So it's almost like inside you're going, I know this person a little bit, but this is my private journey, and I don't know how much I really want to share. Yeah.
So that part has been a little hard.
As I was watching you, Rita, with Michael, I couldn't help but notice that Michael was talking a lot, and that's great. You know, it's really, really good to have a client that's verbal and talking a lot. But I also thought to myself, that makes it even maybe a little harder.
It's trickier.
It makes it trickier, harder to make contact,
Right.
to connect, because it's hard to have your presence felt in the interaction. And so you were, I think, working hard, doing some paraphrases, and of course I really obviously like it. I liked it when you did the walking within technique, and you did that just before the break in this session.
Right.
I'm always impressed with that.
Yeah, and I think it worked because we saw Michael shift from some of his probably more mundane issues to mentioning things like a little fear or threat to his masculinity, which made me feel like, wow, you know, we've dropped a level here in terms of trust and deepened into.
It's a little surprising that you could get to big issues so quickly.
Right.
Just using some non-directive, person-centered approaches. And,
Yeah. In this next section, we'll watch a little bit more as Michael, I think, works on his worldview and
really kind of his way of being in the world.
Right, exactly. So let's watch.
You know, I try to read, I try to figure out different things, and sometimes it just feels so overwhelming. And honestly, because the disease has such a wide range of how people are affected, I have a hard time thinking, well, it's not like I've had my colon removed. It's not like I've been in the hospital every time, you know. And, you know, and then I also, it's always interesting too, because I was like, the people that do find out, like, gosh, I have known so many people that have that disease. Like, it's like, that's so interesting.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, interesting.
I don't know. And
but I notice a lot of times when you tell me about what's going on inside of you, I'm hearing this internal scolding pattern. It's like you get in touch with a feeling, maybe resentment, maybe guilt, maybe sadness, and then you yell at yourself in there and say, well, at least you've still got part of your colon. What are you complaining about?
It's true. It's true. It's like this quit feeling sorry for yourself feeling. And maybe it was the way I was raised. I don't know. You know, because I mean, I didn't, it wasn't like I was, I mean, of course I've had a lot of blessings in my life that I feel so thankful for. And so I really think about that a lot, thinking about, gosh, and I've always had that problem growing up, thinking, gosh, I've been given so much in my life, you know. And it's not like, you know, I haven't had my share of issues, obviously, but, you know, I just feel like I've been given so many things. You know, I was adopted. I could have been left on this doorstep where I would have most likely died, you know. But I was brought here, you know, and I got to live this amazing life. So what do I have to complain about? So that's what kind of goes through that's the dialogue that goes through my head. Like, yeah, I've had this bad thing happen, but, you know, it could have been worse. You know, it could have been, you know, whatever. You know, I could have lost my arms, or I could have, you know, I could be dead. You know, so I kind of go to those extremes sometimes. Like, I'm just sitting there on the couch. It's dark. The dogs are sleeping or snoring, and I'm just sitting there like, okay, one more hour, I can make it. I can make it. You know, and in those times, I'm like, okay, I can feel sorry for myself for a little while because no one's awake. no one's depending on me, nobody's needing anything, you know, and so it's that time, you know, and but then I'm like, okay, it's gonna be all right. I can take another drug here, and I'm gonna be fine now, and I'm gonna feel good. And
so even when you're feeling sorry for yourself in these really private, quiet times, part of the message you're giving yourself is the drug. It'll be better in a little while, and so it's not that all the way down to just, why is this happening to me?
No, and that's the part that I'm a little afraid of doing, honestly. I am. I'm afraid of going to that level. Like, because in some ways in my mind, I think, gosh, you're just whining, or you're just complaining, you know, and I don't complain.
So that inner, we'll call him Mr. Type A, but that inner thing is not letting you face into the despair side of this. Boy, you just get scolded right back away from that.
Pretty quick.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll get there and I'll feel bad. I'll even, you know, I mean, I can't even weep about it at times, because I'm just like, no, it's not, it's fine, it's going to be okay. And that's where my feelings of guilt, you know, when my wife has to make 2 different dinners.
Right.
You know, one that the children will eat and one that will work for me.
That will work for you,
you know?
right.
And she's happy to do it, but it makes me feel bad. And I'm like, honestly, let's just make a bunch of stuff, stick it in the freezer, and I'll just pull it out so that I'm not bothering anybody.
Right.
You know, but she's like, it's fine, you know, but it makes
So
me
this
feel
goes
bad.
all the way back to parental messages of get up there and take a lot of room in the world. And what I'm hearing is you really don't know how much space you should take up in the world.
Right.
You just don't know.
Right. Yeah. And that's the part I don't, which is fascinating, because my alter ego in front of the classroom is, I can be as big as I want, not in a bad way. And I mean, one of the things, and you know, I always think, you know, for me, you know, I you know, since I love teaching so much, I think about it all the time. It gives me a lot of life, and you know, I think about just, you know, my own theories on how to teach, and you know, because I was never taught formally. I mean, I wasn't like, I didn't go to education school. I wish I would have. You know, and I was like, but I've made up my own theories on, you know, just common sense in my mind, but just, you know, creating this atmosphere of community, creating this atmosphere of respect between your students, and not where they feel like they're able to run you over, but where we can have a true dialogue and have this conversation. But I feel like I can just do whatever I want in that arena. Like, and
that's where you're at home.
Yeah,
that's where you can take up all the space you need.
And it's fascinating because, you know, I tell my wife this, like, when I get in front of the classroom, it's like sometimes I'm so lost in what's going on, it's like I have to snap back into reality when I'm done. Like, I'm always like, oh wow, the hour's over. And everyone's engaged, and everyone's there, and everyone's participating, and we just created this whole nother world for an hour or an hour and a half. And, and I'm like, oh, that was weird. And it was the one thing that was helping me take my mind off of the things that were hurting me during all that time.
That's the flow or the muse or whatever you're there.
My stomach or my digestion, all that was just distraught and just all this pain. But I'd get in front of the classroom, and just for that hour, it could just go away. You know, unless it was really bad. But I could even figure out ways to accommodate myself, right? I'd go to the restroom before class, you know, and be like, okay, no, I'm good for a while. But it's just like, it's like my mind could just disappear for a while, and I could just let it go. And even all my little things that bother me, they're let go. Just for that. And I imagine that's exactly, I mean, you say muse, that's exactly what I imagine artists and painters, that's where they get to this place where the world's gone. And they're just, and that's exactly how I feel. I'm there, and I'm so into it all. And all these really emergent things come out of it. I mean, to me, I see teaching as an organic process, as this feeling of all these things that come out of it, that life comes out of, that I didn't even imagine. I prepare, there's no doubt. But do I go into different worlds? But I see it as a story. I mean, every lecture, every class is a story. It's not me disseminating information. Sure, I have to give information, but I see it more as this, we're going to talk about this story that starts at the beginning of week 1, and we're going to bring it back to week 15. And so when I bring it back in week 15, they're like, oh my gosh, you remember that? I'm like, so you realize that it's all connected. Everything's all connected. Maybe it's Buddhist or something. But I just think, but it's so true. Even in the world of computer science, everything's so connected, and it's really an interesting thing. That's what I love about it so much. And you know,
so one of your questions is really, could that me, that's found this home, this peace, this balance, could that me be in other parts of my life?
Yes.
Could I bring
Yes.
this over and find that balance, that peace,
Yeah.
the story?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, even when I exercise, not as much now because, of course, I just can't physically.
Right.
But before, I had a hard time just going out for a bike ride to enjoy the weather, enjoy the scenery. I was thinking, how much time can I do it faster?
Yeah.
Can I go a little bit faster? Can I push myself a little harder?
Right.
And I'm like, what happened to just in going out and enjoying the ride, you know? And I would berate myself a little bit over that and be just like, gosh, why can't you just go out and ride just to ride? You know, and I'm actually, in some ways, I'm really thankful because now I truly am thankful.
Now that question is for real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just made it, thankfully. I just made it through, you know?
Yeah.
And so that is a different feeling. That has been very fascinating.
From the perspective of person-centered theory, one of the things that Rogers probably would say about Michael, but maybe about all clients and all people, is that he's suffering from conditions of worth that are placed upon him or have been placed upon him about who he is and how he functions in the world.
I really was very moved by the actual description of Michael in his struggle to just ride his bike and just enjoy it, not time himself, not push himself. And that's a real struggle for anyone, but clearly as a metaphor for Michael as he tries to integrate his medical condition with other things in his life that matter.
It's also a great general example of the importance of letting the real self be in and experience the world.
Right. It was a great session with Michael, and I think he's the kind of client that works well in the permissive environment of a person-centered approach.